Captain Tech Review here. I know it's been a while since my last video. Been very busy. Been a very long time. But I'm going to be creating a series of videos based on some recent purchases I've done, which will be focused on my home theater system. And I have purchased an Anthem ARC 740, which is a great audiovisual receiver. And their coup de grace is their room correction software, the Anthem Room Correction, aka ARC software. So in this video, I'm going to show the process for running the newest version, 1.6.10 of ARC software. If you're a veteran of running ARC software, there are a couple of differences compared to what had to be done in the past. For one, running the ARC process itself, and two, setting up your subwoofer levels prior to running ARC. So I'll cover that in this video. If you're new to running ARC, I will also put a quick synopsis on how to place your microphones in your room and show you what the example that I have based on the situation I have in my room. So what's nice about ARC software, it will run on, it basically runs the same, well, it's the same process on the different units that Anthem has in their lineup. So I have the MRX series. This will be the same process for the AVM series, 70 and 90. And I believe also the newer STR integrated amp series, which is nice. So without further ado, I will be going over the mic positions. Let's begin. Okay, I'm going to put a screenshot of the guide that Yves St. Onge has actually created, which has been used as a staple for mic positioning. And a shout out to him for providing this. And I'm just going to iterate basically what his process has been. So you see, you follow an X pattern. Position 1 is your main listening position. Then you have 2 and 3 in front of that. And you don't go really any further away than 2 feet from that first position. And then you go behind it for the 4th and 5th positions. One thing to note is position 2 and 3, you want the mic 6 inches lower than it was at position 1, your main listening position. And then 4 and 5, you want it roughly 6 inches above from position 1, your main listening position. So this is, I would say, the normal setup. Now in my case, I am against a barrier. So behind my couch, my listening position is right behind me is a large window. And Anthem recommends, and including in Ives's, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong again, in his guide, to avoid putting the microphone near any type of reflective barrier. So in my case, it's a window. So I have the second iteration, or second alternative to that, I'll put a screenshot here, is the same exact process, except you just shift the microphone a little bit forward. So here I am, my main listening position is like this, and the most important thing about this is holding the microphone, is positioning the microphone. There's a sticker on the front of your microphone that comes with your system, little hole here. This would face the front wall of the room. So as you move it in different positions, always make sure that this dot is facing toward the front of the room. So my position 1 will be located here, and that's roughly ear height once I'm sitting down. So let me go ahead and move that to position 2. So here's my position 2. Once again, shifted a couple feet from my original position, and I did lower my microphone ever so slightly, about 6 inches or so. So I lowered my stand about roughly 6 inches for my second position. And then I move it over to the third, so coming back to my first position here, and moving over to position 3, and so on and so forth. So I'll quickly just show what those positions look like. And position 3, once again, still making sure that my microphone is pointed to the front wall. Here's my 4th position, now with the microphone raised roughly above my above my hearing level. So before, my ear level is roughly this height, and I raised the microphone roughly 6 inches. So once again, position 4, and I still have quite a bit of room. You know, my window's a little dirty on the outside there, whatever, from that barrier. And then finally, position 5. So for my setup, this is what I had to do in comparison to the original guide. but this has given me actually very good results. So let's go on and begin our ARC process. Okay, now that we have gone over the microphone positions, we are now ready to go ahead and launch our ARC calibration. Before we do that, a couple tips and tricks just to quickly cover here. One is I would recommend going into the speaker setup of your unit, and here is my my web GUI here, and configure the speaker setup in the UI. This make running ARC a little easier. You don't have to actually set the speaker configuration in ARC. You can do it here. ARC pulls this data from the unit itself. So like if you have back speakers, enable the back. If you have ceiling, whatever the story is, you could do it here. So I just have a 5.1 set up here, and I have it configured this way. So that's one little trick. If you are going to rerun ARC for this version, make sure you zero out all the speaker trims and distances. Distances default at 12 feet. Speaker levels all at 0. I suggest doing that before running ARC, so that when you're doing the pre-configuration setup, it's going to happen. It's going to be done accurately. Now, if your firmware has updated as a result, recently firmware updates have gone out. This is my system versions, 1.11, 1.83, 7.303. This is still like some of the beta firmware. If your system did recently update its firmware before running ARC, what I have done is done a hard reset of my system. That requires holding the menu button while the unit is off, while holding the menu button, then hitting the power button, and the system reset will then begin. That zeroes out everything for you. So I've actually done that after every firmware update. I just reset the system. It's a pain to set up the process for inputs and stuff. So what you can do is you can go to store load update, and you can export your settings and then re-import them after the reset, and it'll reconfigure any settings that you have, especially for inputs. One other thing I like to mention in the general tab is maximum volume. So I would recommend setting a maximum volume probably a few dB, 5 dB higher than what you usually listen to, because if you use the web UI to change your volume at all, if you accidentally hit from your phone or whatever, if you don't actually hit the plus sign and hit on the bar, it will automatically go right to that point. It's kind of scary if you do that volume-wise, and your volume, the default max volume is plus 10, which is insanely loud. And to help prevent any damage to your speakers or system, I recommend setting your maximum volume ahead of time. And mine is set quite low, so I have no risk of damaging my speakers or system. Alright, with that said, go back to ARC here. Now the first thing that you have to do is we have to set our sub level. Now with version 1.6.10, this is changed from the previous version. The old way of setting your sub trim levels, there's two ways to do that. Two school of thoughts. One was to set your sub to a particular sound pressure level, SPL. And if you had one sub, you had to set it to 75 dB. Two subs, 71, three subs, 60, 8, whatever it is, so on. And the other school of thought was, instead of setting the actual average SPL of the sub to 75, set your peaks to 75. Now with the new version of ARC, that there is a difference in how the system now works. Those two prior methods of setting your sub will not work. If they do happen to work for you, I think it's because based on some parameters that you have, your room, your speaker sensitivity and stuff like that, the room size, whatever, that could be the case where you just got lucky and it actually works. But across the board, process-wise, if you change your room or change speakers, that process will no longer work. Let me show you why. So the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to launch Quick Measure tool. connect to our system, select our microphone, and let me expand the screen here. And what's going to happen is we're going to run some sweeps from first our front left speaker. So what ARC now does, it will run some, I call them configuration or baseline sweeps. It's going to measure the average SPL output from your front left speaker. And what ARC will do is adjust that volume level, either higher or lower, to get to the target curve it's trying to set for. It uses the front left speaker to do this. So how can we appropriately set our sub level with this new way of doing things? So we're going to do some sweeps from the front left speaker. You'll hear them running in the background. Takes roughly 4, okay? And you see my average level SPL from my front left speaker, based on the distance I am away. My microphone is away from the speaker is 64.6 dB, so we'll call it 65. I'll stop that annoying noise now. 65 dB. Now the new method, I believe, for setting up your subwoofer, I'm going to do a shout out here to another YouTuber, Random Distractions, has done an excellent video series on testing the different methods of sub configuration before running ARC. He literally went through 8 different methods in setup and used REW measurement tool to then verify the results of each method. So I had actually reached out to him on some of the work that he did based on what I had found myself personally, and one of his methods that he ran actually kind of resulted to where I think the proper sub calibration for level is prior to running ARC. What is that? So we see my front left speaker is, we'll say 65. So I'm going to run some subwoofer sweeps. Now what you did in the past was you would run some sweeps on the subwoofer, like what's going to happen here. Takes roughly 4 sweeps. It's going to, okay, here it comes. Alright. And I'm at 66.6 right now. So let me stop that. So you would run these sweeps, and on your subwoofer, you would turn the level up on the sub until the level hit 75. That was one method. The other method was looking at your peaks, and you see here on my graph, I have a peak roughly of 75. I have one sub. So I would set my peaks up to 75 dB. That just happens to be the case in my system right now. So I had ran that second iteration with the new ARC. It happened to work out great for me. I had suggested that to Random Distractions during his series of videos, and he actually performed that method in the second video that he did in the series, and he had okay results, but he still had to boost up the bass and whatnot to get, I would say, acceptable levels. Helping someone else, what we was able to discover is ARC seems to want the sub level to be at the same level as the front left speaker. So in my case was 65 dB, we'll say 64.6. Mine is at 66.6. We'll call it 67. So I'm about 2 to 3 dB higher than my front left speaker. Now, after setting my sub up this way, once again I said I follow the second method. I see a peak of 75. Oh, this must be the way to do it. Well, helping someone else who had speakers that were very sensitive, he had much higher output of the front left speaker, and following this method with the subs, we get a message that his subs are too low. So, and then maybe question, oh geez, there's something else going on here besides just arbitrarily setting peaks or a value for the sub to some number. And that, what the case is you must set your sub, in my opinion, to 2 to 3 dB higher, an average SPL level, down on the bottom right here, than your front left speaker. So you see I am already at that point, and I can tell you that I have received so far the best results post ARC. And why is that? My theory is, since the speaker level, front left speaker, and the sub, average SPL level, are basically close, and running at 2 to 3 dB harder might result in better bass response for your preferences, ARC doesn't have to do as much to then quote-unquote balance the system. So what ARC measures, macro measured the speakers and the sub, so there's two different things. So you use the frontless speaker, but it goes around the room, sets the speaker trims for the rest of the speakers. And the sub, because it has its own amp, is sort of treated differently. So ARC doesn't have to do as much adjustment to the sub with this method, and therefore leaves more room to tweak, raise levels, lower levels, whatever. And in my opinion, I think resulted in better results for ARC. So if ARC has to do less balancing, I think you can get more out of it. That's just been my experience, personal experience. Your mileage may vary. I have not been able to test this method out on all systems, but it will, as far as I understand, it has been consistent between the MRX series and AVM series of their products. So once we have this set up with our sub, now 2 to 3 dB higher than my front left speaker, as we pointed out, we can now go back and launch our ARC. So let me pause it here for a second, and we'll go do that. Okay, now that the sub level is appropriately set up, 2 to 3 dB higher than the front left channel, and once again you turn the sub level up itself until it reads that on the quick measure graph, we can go ahead and launch our ARC. So go ahead and connect to our system, continue, and now we go through the wizard. And once again, as I pointed out earlier, since I set the configuration in the UI, ARC picks that up and already has that set up. So one thing you can do here is you see device specific settings in the measurement. So device specific settings, you can set the amps, what they're going to be used for, like the back amp channels will be used for these selections, the height channel can be used for this selection, parallel units, front amp, what's that going to do, so on. So that's pretty much stock for me, default. I have a 5.1 setup, center, surrounds, and one subwoofer, and I'm doing one measurement with 5 positions. That's pretty much the default. You can do more if you want, but it doesn't really affect the it may give you a little bit of better results, but I'm not really sure how much. Last thing to do would be to set the distance from the front left speaker. So microphone position to the front left speaker, in my case that's roughly 10 feet. So I'll set that to 10 and I'm ready to go. Select our microphone. Now ARC's going to start its process. Now the previous way to do this was to set your volume to a particular level to hit 75 dB in the graph. You no longer do any of that. The new version of ARC takes care of a lot of the mumbo and jumbo we had to do before for you. So all you have to do is go through the configuration wizard, set your SPL sub, configuration wizard, get to this point, hit start. And now what you'll hear in the background is ARC do the 4 sweeps. I'll call them the baseline configuration sweeps. It's going to measure the output of my front left speaker. And then what you might hear in the background is, in my case, the sweeps get louder. So amp then increases the volume on the unit to get to a particular level that it's looking for. So in my case, it has to turn them up to go louder. My front left speaker has a sensitivity of 84 dB, so that's why my output is kind of low. Here we go. I have a bunch of stuff going on, me talking and yapping in here. It messes it up. I'll stop there for a minute. So hopefully you heard in the background the sweeps running, and then you perceive roughly the 4 sweep get louder. And one change that has happened in the new ARC, this version, the target curve now is roughly 67 dB. The previous version was 75 dB, and I was affected by an issue in the older version where speaker trims were just way too high. They were set to the max level, which didn't give any room for adjustment. Unfortunately, that's just how it worked previously. No rhyme or reason for it, but now that has been completely corrected in the new version of ARC. All you have to do is run the system, and things will work out wonderfully. So once it finishes the sweeps at the first position for the front left speaker, and then go around the room, hit the sub, so on and so forth, it will then go to the delay measurement, which you keep the microphone in position 1, you see on the screen here. Once it finishes the delay measurement, it then will move on to position 2. So then you move the microphone around and finish your measurements. So without sitting through that process, I'll pause it here. I'll go through that on my own, and we'll come back and look at the results. Okay, so now the measurements are done. You'll get presented with this screen. You want to review, adjust settings, or upload now. So I go to adjust settings. We can take a look at what's going on here, and you see you can set up speaker profiles. I'm not going to go into all the details and using ARC right now, but you can set up a separate profile for different speaker configuration, blah blah blah. Not going to do that in this video. One thing to do once this is measurements are done and you're going through adjusting them and whatever, go in a second, but I recommend saving the file before uploading it to the device, and we'll go on to those tasks a little bit later. So once so that you have speaker profiles, you can select the speakers for that particular profile. You look at the speaker levels. Like I mentioned before, ARC now uses the frontless speaker sort of like the baseline, so it lowered mine by 0.5. And my front right, you'll see it's basically the same speaker, is at 0. So I guess my front left speaker is a little bit hotter than my right, so it lowered my front left speaker a little bit. And my center channel has a higher sensitivity, and that sensitivity of my center channel is basically the difference in what it adjusted it for, which is 4 dB. Then I have my surrounds up a little bit higher, and my subwoofer. And now I had set my subwoofer 2 to 3 dB higher than my front left speaker. Well, ARC turned it down by 4. Maybe we shouldn't have to turn it up so much. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. Once again, this has been my best result so far, is doing that process. So we'll go on to adjust targets. Now, one thing I will point out, my room gain here, I had already adjusted it, defaulted at 2.7, 2.725, whatever it is. And I had boosted up a little bit. I like it a little bit higher than default. Now, once again, my speaker level for the sub was -4. Now, back in adjust targets, these are some of the settings you can play around with to boost your bass response, your low bass response. So the first setting, room gain, will raise or lower by a certain amount the frequency level of 200 Hertz and below. So you see the second level here, you can set, the default is 200 Hertz. So all frequencies 200 Hertz and below get boosted by 3.5 dB. And if I slide this, always things on me. If I slide this up and down, you see it, the curve move a pivot up and down from that point of 200 Hertz. So mine was at 3.5. That's where I like it. And there's something to show after this. So this is adding 3.5 dB to frequencies 200 Hertz below. I just also the bass boost, which will raise and lower the level of 50 Hertz and below, so you can adjust the level of the frequency you want to boost. The default is 50. Now if I raise and lower that, you can see at around 50 Hertz, you see it pivot up and down. So I keep mine at 0. I don't want it too much. It can be too much based on how loud that you actually have your volume. So I personally don't use any. That's just for me. So those are some of the, I'll say, bass response settings you can do, and I won't get into it too much. But why I bring this up is the room gain is adding 3.5 dB. My subwoofer was at -4. If I look in the web UI again, go to speakers, you'll notice my subwoofer level in the unit registers -0.5. That's strange. So what actually is happening is it takes the speaker level of -4 dB. It then adds the room gain. This is what ARC is doing its calculations. It adds the room gain of 3.5, and when it uploads the speaker level to for the subwoofer in the unit is the result of that. So -0.5. And it happens to be the same level as my front left speaker. So this is where I'm coming back to the findings I have been able to produce is setting my subwoofer 3 to 4 dB hot, and then adding like the appropriate level of room gain. You have to play around with it yourself. This happens to result in almost just about basically the same level as my front left speaker. So funny how that plays out. This could be different for your system. This is just my system with the speakers and subwoofer that I have in my room and blah blah blah, how far I set away. But I just found it coincidental. It kind of equaled that same amount. And so far, it's given me the best results. Now, once you kind of set some settings here, you're good. You go back to review, summary, upload. Well, actually, you go to continue. Sorry, we'll go to continue. It's going to go through the steps again. Continue, continue, adjust targets, and then you'll get to calculate curves and corrections, so on and so forth. So this is reformulating the ARC solution that will be uploaded to the device. So if you make any setting changes in the settings, which I did here already ahead of time, make sure you go through the I would say the next step process. Continue, continue, continue. Get to the point where ARC has to calculate the curves, and this is the file. Once this solution is done, I suggest then saving those results, then uploading them to the device. Saving them, you can always come back and add profiles and stuff later. And this is taking an enormous amount of time. Let me pause it here. Alright, so it was done calculating. I guess doing a screen recording and running ARC on my very old laptop does a mix. So now that we have saved our file, I suggest saving it somewhere. Save as. I named it 1.6.10 beta. It's the same version as the new release. Once it's saved, you can then upload to your device. It'll upload. I've already done this. And once that's done, you can now launch the new feature, which is automatic phase adjustment. So to run this, you must put the microphone back in the original first position, main listening position, once again with the dot facing forward, the front wall, at ear level height, and then you can launch your phase adjustment tool, which is after you upload to the device. So go ahead and open up this, reconnect, continue, select the microphone, and what this is going to do is I can start this. It's going to run through a bunch of sweeps, incorporating some of the left is incorporating the front stage with the sub. It will change the phase itself, measure the level of bass at each phase, and take the highest value and then upload it to the device. I'll have to go through that process right now. It automatically sends it to the device once it's done, and coincidentally, mine already has that done. And once that is done, save the file one more time, and what you will notice in the Adjust Targets tab at the bottom, you can look at your subwoofer settings. You'll notice that the phase frequency and phase value are now set in your solution, and that's what has been uploaded to the device. So then verifying that in the web UI and the speakers tab, you will see that my subwoofer has a phase frequency of 80 Hz and the phase set to 180 degrees as per the ARC solution. So that basically will encompass this process in running ARC in the new version 1.6.10. Hopefully, if you're an ARC veteran following this process, hopefully it may have given you some better bass response results. Following the AVS forum, there's been some people asking, oh, I had this message is too high or that's too low. So the new subwoofer level process that I've been able to discover, doing a lot of testing myself so far, has yielded me the best results in my ARC. And talking with 2 other users who have done it in their room using different systems and different subwoofers, it also has given them appears to have given them also their best ARC results afterwards, and which also gives you the room to do tweaks and such later on. Instead of having a room gain boosted all the way up to 6, you have no more room. You have no more room left to add, or in case it's not enough. So hopefully this has helped out with your running of ARC, and I'll be making probably some more videos. If you'd like to see a video on more ARC settings, at least what I have done, I can make a video for that. That's great. But thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you out. Stay tuned for more. Thanks. Bye.